Hi, I'm Lanny, and this is Preserving Today. Okay, today I want to make salsa, but not just any salsa. I'm going to make a fresh salsa and ferment it. The reason I'm going to ferment the salsa is, well, it definitely enhances the flavor, but the majority of the reason is to preserve the salsa. So I can have a fresh salsa that's ready in my fridge and will last for literally years to see what a 5-year-old salsa is like. First, I want to clarify, what is a salsa? So let's talk about it for a minute. Salsa can be so many different things. Salsa just means sauce, as far as I know. So many different salsa recipes. And there's not one salsa recipe that can be fermented. Any fresh salsa recipe can be fermented. So for my salsa recipe, I'm using tomatoes, yellow onion, garlic, bell pepper, jalapeno, lime. Oh, did I say cilantro? Cilantro is important. And salt. So what's important for my fermented salsa recipe is that you're using fresh vegetables. Beyond that, whatever you use, however you like it, just make it so you would like to eat it. And then if you like to eat it fresh, you're gonna like to eat it fermented. It's gonna still taste good. You can make like a pico de gallo and have it be a little bit chunky, or you could make more of a salsa that would be for kind of pouring onto a taco rather than scooping up with a chip. And the difference is just gonna be how finely you chop the food. For this salsa, I'm in a hurry, so I'm gonna actually use my food processor, and I'm just going to actually throw everything in there and pulse it until it's the texture I want it and call it good. I would say there's probably as many salsa recipes as there are families. Depending on who you are, where you're from, what your background is, the way you make salsa is going to be different, and any of those things are fine. The goal here is to make something that's just fresh vegetables, maybe a little lime, some salt, and that's it. This can be made so many different ways: a salsa verde, a rojo, salsa fresca, or pico de gallo. There's so many different ways you can make hot sauce and ferment it. The point of fermenting it is encouraging beneficial bacteria to do some work for you to help preserve your food, as well help enhance the microbiome in your gut. So here we go, we're gonna move to the kitchen, I'm gonna get started. So I'm peeling some fresh garlic, as much as you want. I had a really small bulb and I'm using the whole thing. It's about 7 cloves. Just like really, really rough chopped. Those can go right into the food processor. And that's all I'm gonna do with everything. The food processor is gonna do the work for me. Bell pepper. Tomato. Onion. Jalapeno. So this is where you can decide how spicy you want it. If you leave the seeds in, it's gonna be spicy. Take the seeds out, it won't be as spicy. I'm leaving some of the seeds in and chucking some of them. That's it. Jalapeno in. Okay, everything's in the Cuisinart here, except for the last 3 ingredients, which are salt, lime, and cilantro. I'm gonna get it going first, and then I'm gonna add the rest. Pulse. Cilantro, lime. It has barely any juice in it. And pulse again. There it goes. Now we're going to add some salt. Not too much salt. It was probably a heaping teaspoon. And then I'm just going to scrape the sides down just a little bit because I can see some of the bigger chunks up at the top. And I'm just going to pulse it once more to incorporate this all. That's it. Okay, the next step is fermentation, and that's where the glass canning jar comes in. So many uses. All I need to do is put the salsa in this jar and then leave it on the counter room temperature. You do have the option at this point of adding a starter culture, and that could be about a tablespoon of brine from another ferment, like my taqueria mix or my sauerkraut, or it could be a starter like whey. Even a little bit of ginger bug would do. But for the sake of this video, I'm not going to use any starter culture because the bacteria that we need are already present. And I made a little more than a quart, so I'm going to put some in this jar as well. Okay, that's it. We made our salsa. Notice that it's almost foamy. That's from all that blending. That's going to subside a little bit, and this is going to settle. The liquid might even separate from the solids. Anything like that is totally okay. But the goal now is to ferment it. And all that takes is room temperature and some time. The way I prefer to do that is to use this lid. These are cheap plastic lids that fit wide mouth canning jars, which is wide mouth is what I have. I'll link to these in the description of the video. The reason I like using these is because they're not a full seal, like meaning if you have a liquid in a jar and you put this on tight and you tip it over, it's gonna leak, which is really the downside of the lids. But for fermentation, it's exactly what I need because I want to allow gases to escape from the jar as they come up and not accumulate in the jar. So we put a lid on it. After cleaning the rim of the jar, make sure the rim of the jar is clear. Different than vegetable fermentation, we're not actually going to try to keep this submerged under a brine. I'm going to leave it just as it is, and I'm going to stir it at least once a day. If my house is very hot, I'm going to stir it at least twice a day. Next up is to label your lid. I'm saying it's salsa and today's date, and I'm actually going to even write the time. If this was a new recipe and I did something special, I would write the ingredients on a label as well so I don't forget. Now, in 12 to 48 hours, this salsa is going to be fermented enough that we move it to the fridge. A couple things to keep in mind when you're fermenting something that's like chunky and not going to be kept under a brine is that you can get mold on the top, but that's going to take some time. And the best way to prevent the mold is to stir it, to disturb the surface frequently. And so if your house is hot, I would stir it at least every 12 hours. And if it's not, you can stir it in 24 hours. But you might want to do it at 12 anyway just to check it. Because we only need to ferment this at room temperature for 12 to 48 hours, depending on how hot your house is, and depending on if you use a starter culture or not. Today, I'm not using any starter culture in this recipe because I want to show you that you don't need any special ingredients to make this. This is literally making fresh salsa, which I could enjoy right now, but it doesn't take anything special. You don't have to have a special starter culture. You don't have to buy probiotic capsules from the store to inoculate it. All the bacteria that you need are already present on the vegetables. Even if you buy crappy store-bought, not organic, out-of-season vegetables, there's still bacteria in the environment that's going to proliferate if you give it the right conditions. With salsa, it is important to stir it, so don't forget. Check on it, set a timer if you need to, but check on it, in 4 hours and see what it looks like. Just check on it more often and take it in with all your senses as you're learning to ferment. If you've done this before, you'll know when you need to stir it, and it's probably going to be you start it in the morning, you stir it at dinner or before bed, and you check on it in the morning again. What I look for to know that it's done and ready to move to the refrigerator is that I can see bubbles, which when I use the food processor can be tricky because there's already bubbles in there from the air that we incorporated in. That's not bubbles from fermentation, that's bubbles from just whipping that air in with the food processor. So instead of relying on the visual bubbles, I'm going to rely on the audio. Right now, I'm going to listen to this. It's very, very quiet. There's a tiny bubble sound, and that again is from the bubbles that are releasing here. As this settles, those bubbles are going to go away. You can see, hopefully, it's already starting to separate a little bit. See the liquid on the bottom? The chunks are going to float to the top. The liquid will stay at the bottom. I'm going to stir that back in at least once or twice during this process. By tomorrow morning, when I stir this, I'm going to move the surface and listen. And if I hear a lot of popping and snapping, I know that it's done. With salsa, there is some sugar in the tomatoes, so it's gonna get things very excited. It's gonna make yeast very excited. And what I don't wanna do is turn this salsa into alcohol. So I'm going to be careful to stop this fermentation process as soon as it begins. So that's it for now. I'm gonna check back with you tomorrow morning and show you where we're at. Unless this evening is very exciting, I might check in at that point as well. All right, here we are 24 hours later. As you can see, a ton of liquid has separated and the whole jar looks different. It's less white and less foamy, but there are these big bubbles. And the bubbles look larger, not a bunch of tiny foamy bubbles, but some bigger bubbles in there. You can see the surface looks a bit dry, and that's totally normal. It's because the liquid is sitting at the bottom and the vegetables are floating up top. But if you move this, listen. That is the sound of fermentation. Yesterday, things were foamy, and today things are not. That's settled quite a bit, and all these bubbles that you're hearing and seeing is the fermentation. Oh, that's a beautiful sound. Just really take a minute and watch this glorious sight as you stir your salsa before you move it to your fridge. Wow, nature did that. No starter culture, nothing special. Just allowing it some time at room temperature. The salsa is now slightly tingly on the tongue, and the flavors have married and are about to have a baby for sure. Okay, that's it. To recap, 1. You make some fresh salsa however you want to. Just forget to put it in the fridge for a while. And then, it's done. And you can eat it or save it for all eternity. Seriously, can it get any easier than that? Now go on, try a bunch of different types of salsa. You're not going to be disappointed. Because salsa isn't just for Taco Tuesday. I love adding it to top my eggs in the morning or stirring it into some Mexican-inspired soup. Break the rules. Wait, there are no rules. Just do whatever you want. Remember, stop fermentation by moving the salsa to the fridge just after you see and hear the magical effervescence and before it starts to smell of alcohol. As always, you can find more fermentation recipes here on the Preserving Today YouTube channel, so be sure to subscribe and find more of what I do on preservingtoday.com. Thanks for watching. I'm Lanny, and this was Preserving Today.